So you're in the market for a gaming laptop, and realistically, there are only 3 form factors that you can choose from: 14 inches, 16 inches, and 18 inches. Now, in front of me, I have a bunch of 16-inch gaming laptops. Now, some of them I've already reviewed here on the channel, others still left to be reviewed, but I thought I might as well just gather everything together in one video and just do a roundup and kind of compare what these laptops have to offer in terms of just the overall user experience. Now, there are a couple reasons why 16-inch gaming laptops are so popular. The first obvious one is the fact that you can cram in higher resolution displays, 16 by 10 resolution displays to be more precise, with better specs. And the second is the fact that because you're getting a bigger chassis, it allows manufacturers to cram a beefier cooling system in order to keep the temperatures in check, considering how powerful RTX 4000 series GPUs have gotten, along with the Intel CPUs and Ryzen CPUs. All of those components draw a lot of power, and you need a proper cooling system in order to keep things under control. So we have 9 contenders for this roundup. Starting things off, we have the Acer Predator Helios 16. This is Acer's flagship offering, followed by the Nitro 16, which is essentially a cheaper version of the Neo series. And then we have the Dell Inspiron 16 Plus. It's one of those laptops that you'll find occasionally on sale with some pretty decent specs. Then we have the Alienware M16R1. This is yet another popular option simply because of its incredible price to performance ratio. This thing aspect costs around $2,000, and it comes with a RTX 4080 and a Ryzen 9 CPU. And then we have the HP Omen 16. It's a bland laptop in my opinion. Then we have the Lenovo Legion Slim 7i. It's probably one of my favorite laptops of this roundup. It's slim and sleek. I mean, you guys know what Legion laptops are at this point. We have the ROG Zephyrus M16. It comes in this stealthy design with a beautiful display. And the final contender is the Razer Blade 16. It is the most expensive laptop in this roundup. I'm not surprised since it is coming from Razer, but it has some incredible performance under the hood. Now, just for fun, I decided to add up the total value of these laptops sitting in front of me, and I think it came around to almost $20,000, which is a lot. So it's a little overwhelming to sit in front of these expensive machines. Now, most of these laptops come in both Ryzen and Intel flavors, and I'm not going to tell you which one to buy because both Intel and Ryzen are great for gaming. Ryzen CPUs are a little bit more power efficient compared to Intel, whereas Intel has a faster media encode engine, which allows for speedy, creative, accelerated applications if you're into that kind of stuff. So they both have their pros and cons. Either way, you can't go wrong with both. I think the best way to approach this roundup is to basically categorize these laptops into different segments based on their display, build quality, keyboard, trackpad. I'll get to the performance stuff later on, but the majority of this video is going to be focused on the overall user experience and how it is like to handle from an everyday use case. You know, is it easy to lug around? Because these are laptops after all. So S tier is the absolute best, followed by A, B, and C, which is the least impressive feature about these laptops. So let's kick things off with the laptops from Acer. I have the Neo 16 and the Nitro 16. Both these laptops share the exact same chassis structure, with the Neo built slightly better compared to the Nitro. So as you can see, with the Neo, you have a top aluminum cover that comes in this elegant finish. It's really nice, and it just adds a premium feel to it. Although when you open it up, you're greeted with gamer aesthetics, which is very similar to the Nitro series. So they are pretty much exactly the same. I will say the Nitro is, you can really tell how cheap it's built because the top cover is all plastic. It literally picks up all sorts of junk like your fingerprints and just literally anything. So you have to clean it every second. So that's something to watch out for. I should also mention that there's a lot of keyboard flex with both these laptops. And in terms of the overall weight of the chassis, they're both identical, coming in around 6.17 pounds, and they're a little over an inch thick. So it's not the thinnest laptop in the market, but it'll get the job done. Now, something I should mention that not a lot of people are talking about is just how unnecessarily large these laptops are. Like, take for instance, you have the extension at the back over here, and then when you open it up, you are greeted with a massive chin at the bottom. This doesn't need to exist. I mean, you can easily cut all of this off by reducing the bezels and making it somewhat compact. This doesn't necessarily only apply to the Acer laptops. There are other devices in this roundup that also have a similar problem. So yeah, I feel like this laptop could have easily been smaller, but unfortunately, because of the thicker bezels, they decided to make it as larger as they could. The power supply that comes with these laptops is fairly thick. This is a 330 watt unit, and it's heavy. So if you're trying to carry this thing with you to class or anything like that, yeah, you're gonna be pulling a lot of weight every single day. So just something to keep note of. The Inspiron 16 from Dell surprised me by a long shot. First of all, it comes in this beautiful, minimalistic and sleek looking package. It's built out of aluminum, so it's put together really well. It's built much better compared to the Neo 16 and the Nitro 16. I feel like this is a really good looking, and it's a modern looking laptop. It doesn't look too gamery. It looks very elegant, but that kind of ends when you open it up and start typing on it, because the amount of keyboard flex this thing exhibits is crazy. I feel like Dell might have forgotten to add a little bit of structural support underneath the keyboard deck, so hopefully they can fix that with the next revision, but it's something to point out. I did notice that as I was performing casual tasks like browsing the web or watching YouTube videos, the palm rest area gets really warm to the touch. And I think this has to do with the cooling system, or I guess the lack of proper cooling for the hardware inside. The included power supply is nice and compact. It's a 130 watt unit. So overall, from a portability standpoint, this laptop ticks all the boxes. The Alienware M16R2 is a really cool looking laptop. It's really giving me spaceship themed vibes, because especially with the stadium lighting at the front around the IO perimeter, it just adds a really cool aesthetic. I mean, from the outside, it looks like an Alienware laptop, obviously, because of the logo and the branding. Build quality is absolutely fantastic. I think Alienware outdid themselves since it's entirely made out of CNC milled aluminum. The hinge is nice and stiff. I mean, this thing is set to last for years, considering the premium quality materials that has gone into constructing the chassis. I guess the major drawback is in the weight department, because this thing weighs over 7 pounds, which is a lot to carry around. But on the positive side, at least they've managed to kind of keep it fairly thin, coming in at around an inch. So that's not too bad. But I do want to refer back to the same kind of remark that I mentioned with the Acer laptops. The bezels itself are fairly thick. I feel like Alienware can shave a lot of those off just to make it somewhat compact, but that's just me. I just wanted to point that out. If you're trying to fit this into a slimmer 15-inch backpack, at least the one that I carry, I wasn't able to fit this thing in. I guess I can't forget to talk about the included power supply. This thing is a tank. It's 330 watts from a portability standpoint. It's a nightmare. The Omen 16 is what I would classify as a generic looking bland laptop. There's honestly not a lot to talk about here. I mean, you get, this whole matte black chassis, which is kind of stealthy, and it is made out of magnesium and aluminum components. So build quality is pretty good. It's put together really well. The edges are sharp, so if you're typing for longer periods of time, you can end up with wrist marks. That's something that I noticed with this laptop. And the last thing I want to talk about is the fact that they decided to include a 16:9 display. Now, I don't know why HP decided to stick to the same old trend, because every other laptop has a 16:10 display. This one is kind of, it just looks dated. Plus the hinge is super wobbly, and this is something that I noticed with previous Omen 16 laptops, so things are not off to a great start with the Omen 16. That being said, the included power adapter is nice and compact. It's a 280 watt unit, so I think from a portability standpoint, it's okay. Next up, we have the Lenovo Legion Slim 7i. This is probably my favorite laptops out of this roundup, simply because it's built really well. I think it's an overall excellent package. You're getting this really nice and beautiful onyx gray finish with brushed aluminum edges on the side that add a really nice premium touch. And I also like the little attention to details, like this little notch on the lid, which makes it easier to open the laptop with just one hand. Love that little touch. I also like how the ports light up at the back. It makes it easier to plug in cables in dimmer environments. It's also super thin, coming in at 0.78 inches, and it's also the lightest laptop in this bunch, weighing in around 4.4 pounds. So that to me is pretty impressive, considering the specs that Legion offers with the Slim 7i. Plus the included power supply is nice and sleek. So overall, from a portability standpoint, this thing ticks all the boxes. The ROG Zephyrus M16 comes in this really cool matte black stealthy finish with the anime matrix display. Now, I'm not sure how many of you guys appreciate that feature, but it's cool to have. I think, you can really go to town with the effects and all that things if you just want to kind of turn it on and start a conversation at a coffee shop or something like that. I think it's cool, but personally, I wouldn't really use it. The build quality is pretty solid on this laptop. It is made out of mag aluminum, so it keeps the weight in check as well. I think this would be sort of like a Razer Blade 16 competitor, because from a form factor standpoint, it's very similar in both size and weight. And to top it off, we have the included power supply, which is a 280 watt unit. And again, it's nice and compact. So once again, portability, I don't think it's gonna be an issue with the M16. Moving on, we have the Razer Blade 16. And no surprise, this is the best built gaming laptop that's similar to the Legion series. The design isn't anything different from the past. You get this matte black finish with edgy corners. Razer did mention that they have applied a fingerprint coating on it, but it still ends up picking up all the fingerprints, so something to be aware of. I will say that the sharp edges can get uncomfortable when you're typing for longer periods of time, but I have to give it to Razer for cramming in so much performance into a chassis that's just 0.87 inches thin, and it weighs about 5.4 pounds. So again, very similar to the Zephyrus M16, and the included power supply is super compact. Razer includes a GAN charger, so it keeps things very portable. Now, if I were to categorize these laptops into tiers, the Predator Helios 16 and the Nitro 16 are C tier, followed by the Inspiron 16 Plus and the Omen 16 and the Zephyrus M16 as B tier. And then as A tier, we have the Alienware M16 R1. And then S tier is basically the Razer Blade 16 and the Lenovo Legion Slim 7. I think those three laptops are built like a tank. So yeah, they deserve the S tier status. And now let's hear a quick word from today's video sponsor.
The really capable Performance One FT is now available in white, the perfect complement to matching or contrasting hardware with all the same great features. 4 thick fans deliver proper airflow for the 40 series and below. There's a temperature display so you know when things get hot, support for dual 360s at the same time, 10 gigabits per second Type-C, and a whole lot of character with that front grille, dual TGs, cable covers to hide the mess, and Antec is really turning things around. Pick your own color and enjoy this awesome full tower.
Moving on to the keyboards and trackpads, I'm going to start with the Nitro 16 and the Neo 16 because they share exactly the same layout. It's essentially the same keys as well. So you get a full-size layout. The switches lack definition. The keys themselves have a lot of play. It looks like Acer is using some sort of cheap springs inside, which really doesn't feel as good as the other laptops that I have here on the roundup, but you do still get good amount of travel distance. I mean, it's not as short as the Blade 16 or even the Inspiron 16 that I'm going to talk about in a bit. RGB lighting is nice and bright. The edges of the keycaps have this transparent layer that diffuses the light spill evenly, which I think is a brilliant design choice. The trackpads are okay. They both feature plastic and it's not as smooth to navigate with compared to a precision glass surface. So if you're trying to get anything productive, you're definitely not going to enjoy using either of these trackpads. You're better off using a dedicated mouse. The Inspiron 16 does not feature a full-size keyboard, but I do appreciate how centralized the keyboard and the trackpad are. It just makes it easier to use this when you are using this laptop in laptop mode, unlike the other laptops which have the trackpads sort of off to the left, which typically I'm not a huge fan of. The power button also acts as a fingerprint reader, which is a really bonus feature, especially for a laptop in this price point. Unfortunately, as I mentioned in the build quality segment, the keyboard does flex a lot when you're typing under pressure. These low profile switches are good. They do not have as much as throw as the other gaming laptops. And personally, I think it's a little bit better compared to the Razer Blade 16. I know I said it on camera, but it is true. I actually like typing on these over the Blade 16. You don't get any fancy RGB lighting here, which is okay considering, you know, I don't think it'll fit this modern aesthetic. The trackpad is okay. It's not precision glass, but it will get the job done. It's, I would say, 20% better than the Neo and the Nitro laptops. The Alienware M16 R1 comes with Cherry MX low profile switches. I think the best way to describe these switches is sort of like a derivative of Cherry MX Blues. So you can still feel the actuation point when you press down on a key. I think for gaming, this is a great setup because you can actually feel the tactile response, but otherwise, I'm not sure. I'm on the fence about this, guys, because if you bring this to a classroom setting and just start taking notes, I'm pretty sure you're gonna annoy everyone that's sitting around you. So that's something to keep an eye out for. I wanna add that this soft touch keyboard deck is super comfortable. It's probably one of the nicest materials to type on. The trackpad is awesome. I think it's one of the best out there, but my only gripe with it is the fact that it's too small. There's not a lot of room to work with, but that does make sense because Alienware had to shift the keyboard layout a little bit towards the center in order to accommodate the vents that you see here for better airflow. The Omen 16 comes with a standard layout with more than enough room for dedicated arrow keys. The keys provide good feedback and adequate amount of travel, plus you get some basic RGB controls, but it's nothing too extravagant. And the trackpad could use some more work. It's not super smooth, and I feel like for the price, it's just really not worth it, guys. Now, Legion makes some of the best laptop keyboards on the market. These keys have less play, they're robust, offer great feedback. It's a well-rounded option for gaming and writing out emails. Plus, you get a full-size layout, and the power button also acts as a fingerprint sensor, so that's a nice bonus. The RGB lighting is nice and bright, but I wish if Legion found a way to block out all the light spill around the edges of the keycaps. The trackpad is nice and smooth. I would put it right underneath the Blade 16, ROG Zephyrus M16, and the Alienware M16 R1. The Zephyrus M16 comes with a standard layout, and it's probably the second best keyboard in this roundup. It's great to type and game with since it offers plenty of travel and great feedback. And when you combine that with a massive precision glass trackpad, it's a beautiful experience using this laptop for productivity. I just wished if the RGB lighting was a little bit brighter, because at max brightness, it's still very dim and it just lacks consistency across the keys. Finally, we have the Razer Blade 16, and I mean, there's nothing really much to say here, guys. It's sleek and minimal. It's one of the things I like about the interior space of this laptop. Plus, if you love matte black, this is just a match made in heaven. Now, the keyboard is my least favorite part about this laptop. There isn't a whole lot of key travel to work with. I get that Razer had to compromise on this area to make it super thin, but yeah, it's just something to be mindful about. On the other hand, I will say this laptop has one of the best RGB lightings on any laptop, period. Chroma lighting is consistent and bright throughout the keys. You won't notice any color bleed, and there are tons of effects that you can play around with through Razer Synapse. The trackpad is also massive and awesome. The precision glass surface is super smooth. It's top tier. So if I were to classify the keyboard and trackpad section into tiers, the Predator, Helios 16, and the Nitro 16 unfortunately goes into the C tier class, and then that followed by the Inspiron 16 Plus and the Omen 16. They get B tier status. The Legion Slim 7i gets A tier, and then that's topped with the Alienware R16M1, the Razer Blade 16, and the S tier goes to the ROG Zephyrus M16. The Inspiron 16 Plus has the least number of ports, followed by the Zephyrus M16 and the HP Omen 16. The Legion Slim 7i and the Razer Blade 16 share the exact same port setup, but I have to give credit to Legion for designing the ports at the back, simply because it just gives you a cleaner setup. You don't have to worry about things or cables on the right-hand side, which would interfere with your mouse hand if you're gaming. Some of the other laptops also feature ports at the back, like the M16, the Omen 16, as well as the Neo and the Nitro laptops. Another interesting fact is that some of these, or at least most of these laptops, have a mix of USB 3.2 Gen 1 5 gigabits per second and Gen 2 10 gigabits per second USB Type-A ports. But what I don't understand is why some of these laptops feature micro SD card slots. I mean, that could have easily just been a USB Type-A port. I mean, we all love USB ports, so just there's nothing wrong with giving us an extra USB port, you know? So if we were to categorize the port situation, C tier goes to the Inspiron 16 simply because it has the least number of ports. And then for B tier, we're gonna have the Zephyrus M16 and the Omen 16. As for A tier, that goes to Legion Slim 7i and the Razer Blade 16. And finally for S tier, surprise, surprise, we have the Neo 16, the Nitro 16, and the Alienware M16, since these laptops come with the most number of ports. Now, I'm not sure if you guys care about webcam quality on a gaming laptop, but for my testing, the Alienware M16 R1 and the Legion Slim 7i had the best image quality in terms of overall detail, and the white balance was neutral. The Omen 16 comes in second place, followed by the Inspiron 16 Plus. The Blade 16 lines up with a similar image. The worst of all of this is the ROG M16 and the Acer laptops. The Nitro comes with a 720p sensor, so it doesn't have the greatest detail. The M16 and the Neo are just way off with the white balance, plus it looks dim compared to the rest. By the way, these were tested in a semi-controlled lighting environment. The Inspiron 16 Plus, Omen, and the Legion Slim 7i all feature some form of physical privacy shutter switch for the webcam, which is a thoughtful feature. And if I were to categorize these laptops into both image quality and microphone quality, here is what they look like. As for built-in speakers, this one's a no-brainer. The Zephyrus M16 and the Razer Blade 16 are my top picks, simply because they come with front-facing drivers, which results in better audio projection, better sound signature, overall just a great multimedia experience. I was pretty surprised with the sound quality coming out of the Inspiron 16 Plus. It definitely was better than the Neo, the Nitro, the Omen 16, and also the Slim 7i, which is really unfortunate, but it is what it is. Now, all these laptops come with 16:10 displays, with the exception of the Omen 16. They're all QHD Plus panels with great resolution, and they feature either 165Hz or 240Hz refresh rates. The Inspiron 16 Plus is the only laptop in this roundup with a 120Hz display. Now, generally speaking, you can't go wrong with either of these panels because they all feature faster refresh rates with faster response times, resulting in a buttery smooth gaming experience. Honestly, I had no issues with either of these panels, but if I were to get a little bit more on the technical side of things, let's say if we're analyzing brightness levels, I would have to give that to the Zephyrus M16. That Nebula HDR mini LED display is seriously a treat to look at. I mean, getting over 800 nits of sustained brightness levels is pretty dope. You can choose between single and multi-zone dimming as well. If you're looking for more technical details about this particular panel, be sure to check out my full review, and I'll leave a link to it right over here. To my surprise, the Neo 16 and the Nitro 16 were brighter than the Legion Slim 7i. The Alienware M16, the Inspiron 16 Plus, and the Omen 16 were way below 350 nits, so outdoor visibility is going to be a challenge on all three of these laptops. Now, I should point out that while these Acer laptops feature brighter displays, their Delta E values are way over 1.5, which is the worst in terms of color accuracy. Now, to the human naked eye, you won't really notice that, and for gaming, it doesn't really matter because all you care about is a smooth, buttery-free gaming experience. But if you're someone who's looking to getting into creative work where you want to match those reference colors, you might want to avoid these. Instead, I would recommend you looking into the Legion Slim 7i, the Blade 16, the M16, even the Inspiron 16 Plus surprised me by a long shot as well. So if we were to categorize the displays on these laptops, the Zephyrus M16, Blade 16, and the Legion Slim 7i get S tier, followed by the Neo 16 and the Nitro 16 as A tier. And then for B tier, I'm going to put the Alienware M16R1 and the Inspiron 16 Plus. And finally, we have the Omen 16 as C tier. Now, before I get into performance, I do want to talk about upgradability. And luckily, all these laptops are easy to access in both their RAM slots and the M.2 slots. The Legion Slim 7i only has access to one SODIMM slot since 16 gigabytes is soldered onto the PCB, whereas everything else, you get access to two SODIMM slots. As for memory expansion, all these laptops feature two M.2 slots with the exception of the Inspiron 16 Plus, because you only get one of them. And if I were to pick an award or pick a laptop with the most amount of M.2 slots, it has to go to the Alienware M16 because it has 3 M.2 slots. So you can technically max this thing out to 8.5 terabytes, which is a lot of storage. I don't think you can ever complain about running out of space on a laptop. I think you can even configure it through Dell's own website, but you're gonna pay an arm and a leg. Now, when it comes to actual performance, we couldn't approach this like we normally would because the specs of all these laptops are so different. Some of them have a 13700H and an RTX 4060, while others go for much higher prices and have a 3900HX with a RTX 4080. So instead, I wanted to hammer home one single point. When you look at a gaming laptop, power is just as important as specs, sometimes even more. For example, the Blade 16 and Alienware M16 R1 run their RTX 4080s at very high wattage. Meanwhile, the Omen 16 and M16 come equipped with the same GPU but limit power a lot more. And that means, in some situations, the Slim 7's RTX 4070 could come close to matching those higher-end GPUs, at least in the default power plan. There is an identical situation between the Helio 16 and the Nitro 16 as well. The Neo might only have an RTX 4060, but it gets more juice than the Nitro's RTX 4070. You also have to remember that the power budget on these laptops is split between the processor and the graphics card. So the ones with the absolute best cooling setups will have the highest power limits for both components. So while the Blade 16 and the Alienware M16 R1 are still top of the line here, the Zephyrus M16 takes a huge dive with some of the lowest CPU power numbers while gaming. Meanwhile, the Legion Slim 7i and some others are much higher, so there's less likely to run into processor bottlenecks, especially at lower resolutions. And you can really see what I'm talking about here at 1080p in every laptop's default performance profile. The Blade 16 and Alienware are way far ahead, but because of its high CPU performance, the Slim 7i can actually beat the Zephyrus and the Omen 16. Both of those have a 4080. Meanwhile, the 97-watt RTX 4060 is able to narrowly edge out the lower wattage RTX 4070 in Acer's Nitro 16. When we switch over to 1600p results, that's where the GPU is put in the driver's seat, and the RTX 4080's raw horsepower gets a win regardless of what kind of back-end power is being pumped into lower-end cards. There's usually a price increase of several $100s when stepping up from a 4060 to a 4070 or 4070 to a 4080, and yet the actual performance bump wasn't all that much between an RTX 4060 running at almost 100 watts and an RTX 4070 hitting 85 watts. Now, if you're running ultra CPU intensive tasks, there is a day and night difference in how these laptops handle power. Some throttle back their CPUs, but then they crank up when used in higher performance modes, while others just stick to a relatively narrow margin, so there's not much change between their settings. But if we take a step back, zoom out, and look at real-world performance, additional power doesn't lead to all that much better performance. First of all, AMD-based laptops sit back power but deliver massive numbers that demolish less efficient Intel CPUs. Memory bandwidth also plays a factor, and the Slim 7i is a great example of this. It might have a lower power envelope, but Legion using a DDR5 5200 memory gives it an edge over many other devices that use DDR5 4800 modules. I also encountered a few bugs as I was testing a lot of these laptops, especially I want to start things off with the Alienware M16 R2. I think over the course of 2 weeks, I've had one BSOD, and another instance where Windows just didn't load up properly. Obviously, this required a hard reboot. The Neo 16 encountered a system-wide lockup. I'm not sure what went wrong. I tried to get into Task Manager, but nothing really helped. So yeah, I'm not sure if this has to do with my samples, but I just thought it was worth bringing up. So at the end of the day, if I were to recommend one laptop out of all these that I have in front of me, I think my top pick would go to the Legion Slim 7i, followed by the Razer Blade 16 and the Alienware M16 R2. I think for the price and the performance you're getting, guys, I think this is a steal. It's obviously not the most portable friendly laptop, but if you're willing to pass that, this is a phenomenal laptop. If you can find the Inspiron 16 Plus with those specs for around $1,000, I think it's a great value. Just keep in mind that there are certain shortcomings with this particular sample. The Zephyrus M16 is a great overall laptop. I mean, the display is awesome, it's beautiful, but I think at the end of the day, it just is being held back by its performance. There's one honorable mention that I wanted to share in this video that couldn't make it to this roundup, and that is the Legion 5 Pro. If you find the Legion Slim 7i to be too expensive, I think the 5 Pro is a great alternative. It's got similar build quality, great keyboard, great display. It's just an all-around, well-crafted machine. And if you didn't like either of these 16-inch laptops, maybe you should get a Mac.